Hello everyone and welcome to the video. Roughly 2 weeks ago on the 21st of August, Intel announced their 8th generation Core Series chips, and like most of the things Intel has been doing recently, it didn't make a whole lot of sense. You see, Intel's last few CPU iterations have been only minor adjustments and improvements over the previous iteration. For example, 7th generation Kaby Lake was shamed for being a blatant refresh of the 6th generation Skylake processors, as I mentioned in a previous video, with it only offering slightly higher clock speeds and things like 4K DRM, but the IPC and architectural improvement were no better. As I explained, this almost wasn't a surprise, as Intel's generational strategy has been slowing down since Haswell, with their tick-tock strategy devolving into essentially a tick-tock strategy when looking at the Skylake family, which includes a new architecture and a node shrink as it should, but also 2 refreshes. Moving on from Kaby Lake, in a hurried response to AMD's highly competitive and compelling Ryzen CPU line, was the less than stellar Intel X299 lineup that was not well received at all because it was all over the place, with heavily fragmented feature sets and certain chips in places that they didn't really belong. And now, not quite 3 months after X299's launch, it's unfortunate to say that Intel isn't going back to simplistic launches anytime soon, and it starts with the announcement on August 21st of their first 4 8th generation chips. Sort of. First off the block are 4 new U-series SKUs, which is Intel's mobile lineup for laptops. Historically, Intel's laptop chips have been limited to 2 cores and 4 threads, but the new 8th generation chips will feature 4 cores and 8 threads, which is a legitimate improvement and a welcome one. Mobile chips for a long time in laptops have been stuck with low core counts and weak clocks due to energy and heat constraints. This leads me, however, to 2 exceptions that I take with these new chips. First of all, even though there are supposedly 2 i7s and 2 i5s, all 4 chips are essentially identical except for clock speeds and the fact that the i5s only have 6 megabytes of cache and the i7s have 8 megabytes. For a company with a reputation of heavy artificial segmentation, there is little difference between these SKUs. The second exception, and perhaps more importantly, is that there isn't anything about these chips that are worthy of being called a new generation. These are chips built with the Kaby Lake architecture on the same 14nm plus process as Kaby Lake. Even Intel calls them simply Kaby Lake refreshes. They're literally the same chips as before with more cores and a later release date. And don't get me wrong, that's okay. Companies do similar things all the time, releasing different parts of the same series of product at different times, including Intel's direct competitor, so I don't understand why Intel felt the need to try and convince people that these were next-gen chips when clearly they aren't. If they had just released these chips as an addition to the 7th generation, I'd have had almost nothing to say about them aside from highlighting the specs, but trying to shuffle things around and make them look like things that they aren't is bringing more negative attention than is needed. I do want to point out though, this 15-watt TDP, I do like that. That's a nice power envelope for a 4-core 8-thread part, so congratulations on that. It's easy to see that part of this is due to some of this aggressive power gating and power management that we see here with these boost clocks, and I imagine there's some additional cleverness happening under the hood that is also contributing to that low TDP. Laptops with these new generation 7.5 will be available this month. Now on to the real 8th generation chips and the ones that gaming enthusiasts are likely more interested in. The i7 8700K and non-K variant will be launching on October 5th, along with 2 i5s and 3 i3s. These are actual new generation desktop parts, unlike their mobile counterparts, built on a new Coffee Lake architecture using a 14nm++ process, which is a twice-over refinement of the process that Intel has used since Broadwell. After almost a decade of the same thing over and over, Intel is finally increasing core counts for their mainstream products, with the i7s and i5s now having 6 cores and the i3s having 4. The i7 chips retain SMT for a total of 12 threads, whereas the i5s and i3s only have 1 thread per core. The increased core counts are no doubt a direct response to the high core count and thread counts that Ryzen delivered earlier this year. However, Intel continues to segment chips based on the presence of SMT, and even more saddening, the ability to overclock. The i3 8100-8300, the i5 8400, and the i7 8700 are locked processors that cannot be overclocked. On the 8th gen desktop chips, we also see larger caches across the stack, and all parts power envelopes line up quite similarly with Ryzen's, with no part being over 95 watts, though it's important to note that Intel is using 95 watts for 6 cores, while AMD can run 8 cores on the same amount of power. Base frequencies on the i5 and i7 chips are lower than their Kaby Lake ancestors because of an increased number of physical cores which produce more heat, but single core sees a slight bump on the top 8700K SKU, going up to 4.7 GHz. A leaked photo from Intel's recent presentation in China shows an 11% increase in single-threaded performance and an increase of just over 50% in multi-threaded performance for the 8700K over the 7700K, though we don't know what the testing methodology was. The multi-threaded performance increase makes complete sense considering there are 50% more cores on the 8700K when moving from 4 to 6. I'm holding reservations about the single-threaded performance. If it truly is an 11% increase, it will be the single largest generational improvement for Intel since Haswell, and will be long deserved by a community that has been sandbagged by Intel over the last few generations. Of the chips is still unknown at the time of writing. Finally, if you are hoping to stretch out your Z270 motherboard's lifespan with the prospect of upgrading to Coffee Lake, you will be sorely disappointed. Even though Intel is using the same LGA 1151 socket as Sky and Kaby Lakes, they are once again changing the chipset to what is now the Z370 for Coffee Lake. That's right, if you bought a Z270 motherboard 9 months ago for the launch of Kaby Lake, then it will not work for these new 8th generation chips, and for no obvious reason at this time. This move is classic Intel though, as I discussed in my previous video, Intel Under Pressure, and should come as a surprise to no one. That'll do it for this one, nice and short for the 8th generation preview video. I'll certainly plan to have another video post-launch discussing real-world third-party performance results. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe to my channel, as well as follow me on Twitter with the handle @RationalPC_, where I post updates regarding upcoming videos and other news. I'll see you on the next one.